남다도 좀 설계서지든 댕진방에는 그ven제 샤람인데 너무 주고 톱조 등근 졸라 정자로 롱감지스 송에 빠진로 상부주배 주지 임금 담 야외 yap도 줄정자스 솔로나외 승계 주면로저 레금사베 민주당에서 림닐람 로브르제마장 대신 부신제보 던제바 용진 로마 주바라제라드 간다 조주 동변지 대신 로마를 줄바 간수다 땡들다며 주지참be 년바른 대바 탐제엔드레시 다 근데 담배 최년백 값술라 근데 그거 넘버 다 봤어 봐 전주 줘도 투개네 근데 담배 최 근데 세로나스
Please cultivate pure motivation, altruistic attitude, and a wish to benefit all living beings, and then pay attention to the teachings.
근데 다 당고 말한서 다 제단계 하바 시럽지 하바 제네 되네 하바 시럽지 하바 대양 되네 조 되네 퇴백 시럽라 때네 되네 다외 그 정도 양타고지 되네 쥐고고요 레스 제네 안에 되네 라바트레스 되네 다외 그 정도의 양타고 쥐버 제발라 되네 조디 되네 따와드 간을 응원진 거고요라서나 제단경 안한테 넘버 산제백 따와디 되네 다시 저바 계단 요소 차외기 되네 따와드 응원진 거고요래 대인도 대손장 되네 대다벽이 되네 다시 저바 계단 요소 차외기 되네 대다벽이 따와디 되네 베나 롱다 릭베기 고네 되네 소소게 이체바 짬지게 팽게요 말이 대인도 가르레스나 되네 롱다 릭베기 소소게 베나다 다 릭베기 토네 이체 짬지 예바이나 양 되네 델 때네 되네 베나 가서고래 디코네게 되네 칭와텔레 되네 저외게 잡아요 말이 되네 대손자 대다뷰키 되네 쪼디 강국이어서나 되네 단단한 다 가리나야리 베나다 예베게 탈라 송아이나리 메베 따버타와이나리 체버타와이나리 딱세 니스타와이나리 강이나양 디 되네 쪼 짐발라라레게 예든 짐바텔레 tro고요레 디 저바르 제발라 되네 쪼디 강국이어서나 되네 대다뷰게 따웨게 네루 똑바티 근데 소소그 곰베 냠수뇽웨게 고네 근데 냠수라이 고고요 레스 대손자 될 때네 근데 하바 숨디나네 근데 하바 땡은진지 하바 삼된지 하바 송고베 좀 듣는다 테레스.
So last night we spoke of the learning of the wisdom. Particularly, we dealt about in the learning or developing of the wisdom, we talked about the correct view, which is the ultimate nature of the phenomena. That is the very correct view. The correct view meaning... So the correct view in this sense of referring to going beyond the four extremes and also beyond the 8 conditions, not grasping, attaching to any extreme, nihilism or eternalism, that whole understanding of the logic, the philosophy, and that of the intellectual understanding becomes very much the correct view. of everything as it's the nature of everything.
Pena tati tati tundisene yabundo. Tene this is this do tati kanse yoresena tene tashi joba ge sene ti shagobe jumsen rabuti tene 단당 아란 쪽에 다 지단게 다 짐바지 요래 다 출배게 원에 근데 유런 진단지 요래 근데 짐바티 근데 타시다 근데 저바 제 콘수먼 뒤바지 자원이네 요마레스 데 간데레스나 베나타 저렇게 유튜브니 직시하나라 근데 타시다 저바 제 스티스고베 좀 센티 베나 당묘그 값소라 베나 아란 쪽에 다 야면나 가서 오래 응어버생인데 탐제 응어버를 좀 요래 써야지다. 야면나 탐제 응어버를 좀 요 말에 써야지게 다 유지다 매지게 다 문진 생애지당. 근데 야면나는 응어메 가야 매버진 점바지게 니스 요래스. 근데서 용거 요래. 대손장 인도 근데 대 두바 예나 타시 저바 제다 용스 다 타시 저바 제가 콘순 두고 요래. 타시 써야 돼 간세가 요래스나 디스가 요레스 근데 배나 가 뭐버생에데 직 여바이나 하고송아 뭐버생에데 여바이나 근데 배나 뭐버디 여두 근데 답은 된탐발 여바이나 세가 요러고 된탐발 여바이나 근데 야메나 대 뭐버디 여바디 계획이 주지고 요래 대 계획이 주티 배나 달에 계획이 요르당 근데 셴에 계획이 요르당 근데 다시 니가 내 계획이 요르당 근데 네가 마임바 쓰다 가야 매바지. 주매바지 쓰기 여러봐. 주매바 니를 깨가 여러스 전땅 하나도 배나 낭배게 르바텐데 돈에 땅게 여러스. 근데 달에 깨가 여나 하고송아 다 당부티 계슬라다. 등에 골티골 다리테스 시에기니스.
So now that getting back to the idea of why that we have stressed, talked so much about the correct view of all phenomena being the going beyond the four extremes and that of the eighth condition is that there is nothing that is not included within the four extremes and eight conditions. The whole idea of our not able to understand, realize the ultimate nature of phenomena and not understanding the interdependent origination is very much really based upon the grasping, clinging to the idea, for example, that we have a very strong clinging to either it existing, or we have feeling or grasping to the idea of it does not exist. So therefore now to give the whole idea of the going beyond such extreme means that generally when we feel that something exists, it needs an origin to take birth. So the birth is not from yourself. The arisal, the birth of anything, phenomena, is not from self. And the birth of all phenomena is not from others. And the birth of all phenomena is not of the both, self and other. And therefore, in the idea of the going beyond extreme is that it is not a birth also that has no cause, because any birth should have an origin or a cause, therefore there's no cause. So going beyond that whole idea of that birth is not from yourself, not from other, not from the both or union, or not from the without the cause, then you go beyond the very idea of grasping with the idea of existing or non-existing.
This Hindu, this one's ta Hindu tangbo benata da singing the kanji that and tambo tango but kagayores, Hakosoma, no but the kagayore, then it tanda banana to tubiore, sambege, ta chetamche, rangoble tubiore, sambege, munzin the kaguyores. Tetabu tubiore, sambege, nobun zimbachi yorba, Hakosoma, munzin tea, bena. 강이나양 두제게 추 뭐벌 주비여봐 이나 근데 주단데 간데스 주비어래 고소와 배나 주어발라 배나 따찍네 줍고 요어봐 가서 그래 듀메발라 근데 배나 데부께 그 말봐 대손자 근데 뭐벌 주베기다 배나 강한 게 주고 요래 근데 소소 딱지 땅고 요래스 배나 다 단다 강한레스나 나란 속에 다 생애지다 신 생애지다 배나 요래스 다 생애지 여버지 상고 요래 신 생애지 여버 상고 요래 다 배나 다 생애지 여베 마체 근데 코랑 주로와 매버지다 오늘 다 생애지 여 상고 요래 대답이게 다여 삼바트 당부 빼차샤바나 다여 삼바지 요래 봐 대답이게 다디 근데 다디 강한에 깨게 요래 다디 다 코랑게 깨게 요래 당 신게 깨게 요래 다 코랑게 깨게 요나 당부 다 코랑 게다 깨버 제발라 근데 다 코랑 당부 강한래 깨제게 육 코랑 거 모두 가르 다 생에데 가반도 반나 다 생에디 반나 타지 깨고 요래 봐 깨고라 당부 다 코랑 근데 좁대 고고 요래 반나 제부께 배나 깨와라 당부 주사변지 고고요래 사변 되게 레부터 야 깨게요 된 너신게 벤다 강하게 깨게요래 소소 딱지 땅고요래 대손자 되네 다 생에디 땅하는 주 배나 독세다 배나 간데르세나 벤다 다 생에디 되네 소소게 배나 나 류를 깨와래세나 류니 되네 콘도 주르샤라를 좁대게요래 배나 샤라를 좁아래 되네 배나 디 인도 다 시라고랑 세버봐 가르레스나 벤땅하는 시외 내가 잡지 이나래 대면배 내가 잡지 이나양 근데 배나 류도 돌게 요르데 이나양 근데 배나 디값솔라 다기 준지 체게요 말에 다도 코랑 무트니 용거요래 대손상 인도 근데 체게 배나 가서 오래 다 주진 때는 깨봐 말했어 하고 송아 다음 기회 되시나다
So in this very philosophy, one needs to really examine in this manner to understand the correct view and go beyond the very grasping of the existing and non-existing. So the manner how one needs to really understand that is as explained, that one has to examine very logically that at present we have strong clinging to the idea of existing self or I or ego, in other words. Then you contemplate and think, what is the origin of ego? What gave birth to ego, in other words? And therefore, the ego has not given birth itself. And the other phenomena has not given birth to the ego or self. So therefore, if there was really
딱 가르레스나 하고서 가르레스나 단다 예바따도 나와 당 근데 매바따도 나와 강이 임바디 상마티 단 돈나 땡들게 정신 때는 한거 여송하래 땡들게 주니 이송하래 셴라 다 셴는 중고 여나 하고서 셴네 셴께가 여서나 그봐 셴네 셴께가 여서나 다 문바키 셴티 어르바 어기 셴디 문바르바 다 ngo마체는 문바다 셴티니 문바다 셴티니 간다르바 그봐 근데 셴레 셴께가 여서나 문바 레장 왜 듣게 고고요 yes
the phenomena or the others gives birth to very self, very ego. Then as explained that because there are many objects, phenomena, that one must experience many selves or I. And it is explained in the example that if that there is really that origin of self from the others, from the phenomena, just as for example the darkness or the shadow is the very much the outcome of the light. Since there is the interdependent connection of light and shadow, although the whole term light and darkness or shadow are the opposite word, because darkness and light are opposite, that if the very much the birth is given by phenomena, then there should have also darkness through the flames of the fire, which does not produce darkness. And so, so therefore, that if the others or phenomena has given birth to the ego or self, or whatever, what you call, because we are dealing here with very much ego. So you can say I, me, mine, all this is very much. So in short, that you're grasping to that existence of me, that if the phenomena has given birth to such, that the flame of fire should or must give birth to the darkness. So that is, you can ask questions later. I know you have some confusions, but I understand. So since such, that what is being explained here is that the ego is not, could not have given birth to itself.
So danzin senare ta kanji ngobrun zembati. Ta ngobrun zembati dale kewa mari shene kewa ta bana maindu tene dashi niga le kesse ga mares. Tene dashi niga le maindu ju mebale te tejang kesse ga maras.
And it has not given birth by the phenomena, and since there is no origin, no cause, that ego cannot possibly take birth. So it has not taken birth at all. But what has happened is that through our grasping, we have labeled something that has not taken birth as taken birth through our mind or projection. But so that labeling with the grasping or attachment caught us to the idea of existing ego. Otherwise, the ego has never taken birth because it has no origin, not from self, not from other.
Tendes jidu desonza ta shi segoya jumsen de tunda teres. Hakosonga benata yoba yina yamena ta dali ke goyor yamena shene ke goyor yamena nigale ke goyor yamena niga ma imbes de jumebal ke goyor te kane benata tanda shebena shin ke tugoyo mares. Desonza indu tene bena 다 주메바지게 되는 데브 여바지 남이 세게 말레스 대손자 인도 되는 바나 줘봐요 말레스 되는 다가 나신기 바나 다 단단한 주 줘봐 제세야티 다 계절 토유바 대세야티 바나 다 단단 군접 그 점도라 당부게 되는가 되는 다가 나신기 다 바나 게네 되는 다 여바다 되는 딱 봐다 되는 거란 만주로에 그다 거란 내배 그살 딱 반다보다 되는 윤조도 세바다 되는 로와다 오와다 다 된데 그 줘봐 열어봐 줘봐 된주 상마 단단 안 하고 군접점도 난게 열어대 대 예나양 되는 더 한발라 되는 뭐버생에데 제주 예네 깨와식 당 거주 예는 각바지다 된데게 말에 깨와다 각바 대다도 나와도 가는 때는 난게 열었으나 된들게 나와도 되는 난게 열어 깨와라 때네 각바를 때네 깨와 오와라 때는 로와라 때네 오와 되네 딱바를 때네 체바를 때네 딱바스 때네 된데스 때네 된들게 파 나와 된들게 추니를 때네 된데스 때네 파 딱바르마도 더 한발 깨왔을 때네 되네 배트 오늘 깨주여 버치다 각바스 때네 오늘 각주여 버치 된데 마임바 되네 트바 제색 샤고베 좀 센터나 테레스 된데스 시두 대손자다 배나 더 담배게 내루 함 따웨게 정도도 양다고 최벌 제발라 대답이 다시 대당 되네 트바 제도 용스 타와지 고고요레스 다 된도 단당에 다가서 시에벌 때 림베게 캐나도 오마튼 롭존 시다 디나 야고요레스.
So those are the four extremes, and then also that the 8 conditions are not involved. Separate oneself from the 8 conditions is that since having now explained those not having taken birth from self and the other, so in that sense that there was no cessation, no death. Since there is no death, there is no birth. Those are the 8 conditions. No death, no birth. And since there is no death and no birth, there is no nihilism and no eternalism. And there is no nihilism and no eternalism, there is not coming and no going. And there is no coming and no going, there is no separate. And there is no oneness. That is the 8 conditions, being beyond those, is very much the being beyond the 8 conditions. Now, why everything exists is very much interdependent connections. When there is one, there is a separate. When there is coming, there is a going. Those are interdependent origination or the connection we're talking about. When there is nihilism, there has to be eternalism. When there is birth, there has to be death.
답변은 안 한주 그 삼나 되네 변은 찍이나 찍찍랑 이임바지 되네 타데디 찍 변은 타데 이임바지 되네 찍데 타데 마이임바지 타데 찍 마이임바지 답은 안 한주 출배 특수생게 열었어 되는데 말했어 찍을 때는 타데라는 진이 찍 되네 더 담바다 찍도 타데 가야 매봐 되는 신거 좁아 땡종세야 됐송요 열었어.
Because that we are an ordinary being, particularly not having fully eliminated our confusion and that of the obscuration of the habitual pattern, we become very much one-sided, so to speak. If one, then we think that is very much one. But what here it is explained that they are all interdependent. If there is one, there has to be separate or two. And if there is birth, there has to be death. And if there is coming, there need to be going. So they are all dependent upon each other. There's no such thing. There's no such thing that exists on its own without needing to depend upon anything at all. When there is eternalism, there is nihilism, because they depend upon each other. Now, although this is very much a brief explanation, that you must also get familiar with this idea by studying more in depth of the subject on the Madhyamika, which explained very fully.
Tendes chene tan dorna tene tat dorna tawa yang thakwa se at khan se ge yoresena tene tashi troba je do yons trawe ki tene lam tene ta umek ten tela tene sosuge tangye ba ni gu yores 하고 소 tene tingye ba ni ne tene 되게 녜바 녜바 잠지게 책잠지게 토는 녜바 녜베게 팽게요 말에 tene 디 베나 소수게 tene 더 건배기 냠수 낸 거고요래 대손상 텔라 tene 라바 샤랍지 라바스진 송아레스.
So the correct view, or the rather authentic view, is developing that correct view to your studying, learning the proper means by applying the study of Madhyamika and then understanding going beyond the 4 extremes and not being involved in the 8 conditions. Now, having learned such, having developed that wisdom through the logical means is not sufficient. Even if you have studied many teachings of the Buddha Dhamma, that education alone is not sufficient to actually realize Buddhahood. That correct view or authentic view is necessary, but having developed a very clear, accurate sense of correct view, then the next thing that is important is meditation. That's why the third learning is the learning of the samadhi meditation.
This sondu ta laba samden ji laba sonare tene laba samden ji laba se ya de jadang ke tene sondu samden se am tengen zen ji laba sondu khan song yo resena tene ta theta bu ki tene ta tashi treba je da yons trawe ge tawa thege tene shi chene tene de teng dola tene sosu ke tene gombe gi nyamnyon din rogo고요. re tene de karere sena tene 당보 tene ta gombe gi tene telayang tene jedange ta tekbaren ba sumsin yeban 신게 tekbaren ba sum게 tene bana gomrim mandawa 망부 연구요. re 하고 송은 만다와 연구요를 뒤나네 tene 당보 뒤 tene 다 gomrim 탐색게 자와am 신라부디 tene 당보 신에다 항통 때네
So the samadhi is actually a development of the profound meditative stability. And therefore, that having again a sense, understanding of the four extremes and that 8 conditions.
benata rigbege tone di hakwa temba toba tele tene handongi tene sharap de ngon churtu yores.
Why that the shamatha and the vipassana is also a ground of all meditation. Ground of all meditation, and why it is also regarded as the very tool that develops mindfulness in ourselves is that by lack of mindfulness, we cannot become a proper practitioner, because in general practice, we know the importance of developing bodhicitta, the altruistic mind or enlightened mind. Or in the higher practice of the Vajrayana, there is very much the visualization of yidam. Whichever one applies of the cultivation of the enlightened mind, or the visualization or development of the yidam, if you do not have a very strong mindfulness by the virtue of the practice of the shamatha, every thought, every conception pollutes the very idea, the enlightened mind that you try to cultivate, the visualization of yidam that you try to visualize. And so as such pollution, that you do not experience a clear and pure nature of the enlightened mind, nor the very visualization of the yidam. As such, to eliminate that very pollution of thought or conception to our enlightened attitude and that of the yidam practice, that if one really depends upon the shamatha meditation strongly, then as a result of the pure or strong shamatha experience, one develops the mindfulness, which also takes birth to the insight, inner awareness, which becomes as the vipassana.
Pena kandesire sena tene ta ngaranzu tanda koala tulseya ji yorba tene koala tulseya thi tene ngusuki tene tulsene tene semtela kasegore nyomumba tene ke tene daga na shinki nyomumba ti ke pa ke ta semtela pete koran chola da masuna cha tendes chene koala tulsege yo manes tulseya de kansege yo resena tene zo tene nisunzimbe danziam nisunzimbe nawa marikpala tene tanda ngaranzu tuda namba kundula tene kasegore 남도 가르치나 양 때네 배나 시다 마소나티 때네 뇨몬바 디게 시체네 때네 코라 쌈 코라라 라와자와니네 메바 근데서 용구요레스 대인도 때네 대더부기 때네 출바티 단 너나 출바세야티 가는 거는 생겨요레스나 때네 박사경에 배원 송화들 출바세요레 대더부기 출바텔레 도와 제바텔라 tene 강국이 와르잖아. tene 자외게 소수게 두 박차 상보지 때네. 소수게 박차 상보지 때는 토바티 tene 전시를 때네 땐 고기 와래. tene 대 전시 되게 박차 때네. tene 박차 연바텔을 유래 겨와지 고기 와래스. 대 매바지기 tene 배나 출발에 세야티 tene 다 출발에 파 조월 제발라. tene 소수게 가서 우리 냠내 인스전에 tene tense zawanine meba jike tene koran tikala jik pa uzuk jabshaban da uzuk banda buchi cheba yina tene jik jebu jaban da buchi ta chala di pen togomen to sabu jukban yis tende ki tone ngarazu 출발에 쓰는 세게 요 말스 출발 세야데 간 세게 요르스나 샘 코란의 tense zawanine meba che meba 당부 값으로 샘 코란가 랑이 모데 마시 하고송아 랑우 마시 바체 tene 랑우 마시 네 tene 당신 니슨진의 출 대 출발라 때네 때네 되게 때네 레더 뇨몬바게 때네 게 뇨몬바게 뇨몬바 되게 때네 레 넘버 나서바 사네 디 박자 코란게 때네 춘조와 인도 때네 되게 샘텔라 대시지 때 마토바 이나 현다게 냠는다 보지 제바 이나양 tene nyamne tenzu changma khora tene tandate namdo da tene ge wang de ne tene yang da ba jin tu yo ma res de son zang yin du de de bu ki tene di parche da 가서 wala tendu shiwar chebala da khari gu yo resena tene de 당부 대시에 대한 다 버시 땡 고요래 tene 대시에 대 땡버 chebati 당부 때 신헬 때는 거고요 res.
So the whole idea of why we say that our mind is deluded, we are caught within the samsara, should not be again misunderstood as that we have destroyed that our inner quality of the mind. We have not separated from that very inner quality or potential of mind. The idea of confusion is that, again, not understanding the ultimate nature of the mind, not having recognized the ultimate nature of our mind. Thereafter, that we are overwhelmed by the past habitual patterns of the negative action, and therefore our mind, which is very much proper, stainless, do not experience any independence. By the strength of the past negative habitual pattern, it's sort of overwhelmed by that very power, and so being overwhelmed by the past habitual pattern, which at present not having any choice or independence, it still continues to involve in the negative actions of the body, speech and mind, which is known as the conflicting emotion, and accumulating furthermore habitual pattern or negative habitual pattern, which again strengthening the very habitual pattern that we have built in previous life. So that is what it really means by confusion. So what we need to really do here to get rid of ourselves from confusion does not mean that we should not force ourselves to experience something that is not within ourselves, to find something that is not there or external. But what is necessary is to undo the negative habitual pattern that we have become so familiar in previous life to the present life. So the manner to become free from the negative habitual pattern is to adopt positive habitual pattern. That is the very remedy of the negative habitual pattern. And thereafter, to try to understand that the very nature of the mind is itself again stainless, unconfused, but because of the strength of our conflicting emotion, of the habitual pattern, that we are choicelessly led to indulge or rather engage in the negative action. With that understanding, without again blaming any those sort to the external being, we must apply the method or remedy upon ourselves, that is to eliminate confusion, and that is again to engage properly in the positive habitual pattern or accumulate positive habitual pattern. Now, to be very successful in accumulating the positive habitual pattern is again to be mindful. If one has not built a foundation of the mindfulness,
tene 냠네 현다지가 컨테스트 때문에 있으나요? 될 시도부터 자원이네 매버레스. 가르레스나 배나 간지 가나도 남부 산지베게 람로 슈베게 제술라 tene tikpa rinpa khandeji ke thone nyamne tangi yunaya dii tsawan rabuti pena truba le chordaan de tanda thakaran res pena tikpa chenpo yinayang tene bhaksha pena truba seyade bhaksha tila nguyen zingayor sanga dorji tikpa yinayang truba seyade bhaksha tila nguyen zingayor bhaksha tila chowar chebeke lamjere tele losu churba chiki pena ta khashige pena samgiyore 가서 우리 협자급자게 뉴바 협자 누요yan 라보다 가서 딜 식지여봐 인지게 가인고 superstitious sorry 텐데게 토네 텐데 많이 tet사원이네래요 말해서 탐체 가세고래 람 칸데지 장be 이나 쪼디 단다티 박장이 바텔라 토르체바 인도 대 제발라 근데 당부디 탐치 그 자원다 버티시디 다 되시대 요레스.
So the development of the mindfulness becomes very much again key or two to the develop the capacity or to undo, to remove oneself from the negative habitual pattern, to eliminate the confusion. Because of lack of the mindfulness, that even if one has a motive to engage in the positive habitual pattern, then one again, by the lack of the very mindfulness, as one's mind gets influenced, overwhelmed by the conflicting emotion, without any awareness, you tend to engage or that of the very much into the negative action of the body, speech, and mind. That has come from lack of the mindfulness. And in short, although that there exist many different vehicles of the teaching, which are known as the Hinayana, Mahayana, and Vajrayana, and or there are very many different stages of the meditation itself. Although there are many stages of the meditation itself, they are all aimed towards the removal of the negative habitual pattern, and thereafter, which is removes the confused state of the mind. And one must not think that the capacity to remove such negative is very much short. It's through, without any superstition, that some people get lots of superstitions that you get polluted in a moment and you're able to sort of undo all the habitual pattern without needing to apply any sort of mindfulness or meditation, but with some strength. That is not possible. One needs to apply any sort of meditation of the different vehicle, different stages of oneself to remove the habitual pattern and to remove confusion, and to do so, that mindfulness becomes very important.
어떤데스레 테니테 인도 다타레 캐란스상마 가서 그래 다 위켄드 독스레 테인도 테니 단단한 추수 체계는 가지 테니 시내지 공부이 있었잖아.
So this is our weekend, and His Eminence like to very much thank and welcome you for the weekend. And first, we'd like to do about half an hour of this shamatha meditation, sitting meditation, which we talked about how important it is to develop mindfulness.